watching Beyond Markets. Welcome. I'm Esther, Awoniyi. Many thanks for joining us today. On today's show, we'll focus on Nigeria's renewed sanitation drive. As always, you can join today's conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets. You can also send your comments or your thoughts to my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther O. Awoniyi. Now, Nigeria has set a target to eliminate open defecation by the year 2025 and to promote sanitation and hygiene. Well, joining me to discuss the country's renewed sanitation drive, Chizoma Opara. She's the acting coordinator of Clean Nigeria campaign at Nigeria's Ministry of Water Resources. Also joining me today is Zaid Jurji. He's the chief of section Water, Sanitation and Hygiene at UNICEF Nigeria. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Now, this is something we always talk about, especially because it occurs mostly in the rural areas: water, sanitation, hygiene. Zaid, let me start with you. I know that this is also a key project of UNICEF, ensuring that, especially in rural areas, people are educated on hygiene, proper hygiene practices, etc. But the numbers, I'm not sure the numbers look too good at this point, but just to give us a sense of what we're dealing with right here, could you just talk us through that?
Yeah, thank you very much. UNICEF works in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Water Resources and the wash sector. We've been working for quite long years, and recently we undertook a survey. We call it the NORM, the National Outcome Routine Mapping, and it's a national survey, and it reveals data at state level as well. The results were, were really an eye-opener, I would say, to show how bad the situation of WASH is. When we talk about water, sanitation, and hygiene, it's the three of them being accessible as services to the people. The level of service stands at 11% only, 11% for the entirety of Nigeria. When we dig deeper, WASH should be available at schools, for example. WASH, again, stands at only 7%. Health facilities, it's at 6%. Number of people practicing open defecation, which is a big problem here. We all know Nigeria now is at the second place compared to India, but India is moving forward. 1 in every 4 people in Nigeria practice open defecation. So the situation is really dire and something needs to be done about it.
Chizoma, let me bring you in here. The Clean Nigeria project under the Ministry of Water Resources, you also put together some numbers or just a picture, as it were, to help us understand what we're dealing with here. The use of the proper sanitation practices and, of course, just WASH in general. But to help us understand, looking across the country, I'm looking at the North Central here having very, abysmal numbers.
Okay, like he has said, we have 47 million Nigerians defecate in the open. And when you further disaggregate that data, we're looking at 50.3% of this comes from the North Central Nigeria, with other zones also having 11.3, have 11.3 and the likes. So that's also, by implication, means that within the North Central, we have 1 out of every 2 persons defecating in the open. And this is quite a huge one for Nigeria.
So, Zaid, let me bring you in here. How it starts in the first place. Like I mentioned earlier, it's usually at the rural areas, and the government that's closest to the rural, communities is the local government. So, what is the issue? Is it a lack of awareness, programs or campaign to sensitize people on the need to have better sanitation, hygiene practices?
You've read some figures from the maps. Whether it's 50% or 30%, it's all bad, really. I wouldn't see as one is better than the other one. It's bad, and Mrs. Opara spoke about 47 million people defecating in the open. This is equivalent to the population of Spain. You have one European country within Nigeria in population who defecates in the open. Now, what needs to be done? We've been working together with local governments, with the federal governments, as UNICEF, being funded from donors. And we have a system of so doing. So it's about, first of all, sensitizing the population. Telling them what are the drawbacks of defecating in the open. and then making available the enabling environment. So people will need to see what are their options. I mean, when they get convinced that open defecation is something that they will need to reject, they will need to see options. So there comes the sanitation marketing. Sanitation marketing will give them the options. Now, ending open defecation is one thing. Achieving the SDG level quality of service, which entails that the sewage should be treated and it should be safe, this calls for another level of involvement. So people will be given options on what kind of latrine they want to choose. And then some people will not have the financial capacity to do so. And within that, we've also worked, we call it the sanitation financing. There are groups within the communities, they're called the adachés, where people start loaning to each other. And then we have MFIs, microfinance institutions, where people could borrow from. Now, some of the states have recognized this, and they have put in some extra resources. They are loaning their people through the MFIs. Of course, when the state loans its people, it's against a zero interest rate, so people could borrow against a very low interest rate. This is something that is happening, but we've been doing this, and the progress has so far been mechanical. You know, over the past country program of UNICEF with the ministry, we've been able to reach 5 million people with safe sanitation services. But this is beaten by the demography. The increase in population will be more than that. To end open defecation, as the government has committed, I mean, His Excellency, the President, committed to ending open defecation by the year 2025. It's 6 years from now. And if we do not do something different, if we do not manage to expand exponentially as opposed to the mechanical increase, we will never be able to get to that.
Chizoma, let me bring you in here. I mean, according to your report, the Clean Nigeria report, Nigeria needs to add 2 million toilets every year but from now, 2019 to 2025. But let's just, before you answer that, let's take a couple of steps back. When we talk about open defecation and the fact that I mean, so many people, looking at the statistics, practice it, is it because they cannot afford the latrines or toilets in the first place? Help us understand that. Okay,
looking at open defecation, particularly in Nigeria, most times you have the cultural issues. Many people are actually not aware of the problems that are associated with open defecation. And that has actually led most of them ignorantly to go about defecating in the open. And yes, the poverty issue may be there, but we actually have to look at it because when you go with interventions within communities, you actually notice that there are people who can actually afford them, but they have not seen the need that they should because they don't know the hazards that are associated with it. It has health impact, it has economic impact because people, the water they drink is contaminated with fecal matter, and we have a lot of outbreak of cholera and the likes. And with all that, you see that many of them still need that. And just like Mr. Zaid has said, a campaign put in place can actually go a long way to open the eyes of a lot of people to begin to see the need to build toilets. And also, when you also look at the fact that there are also the business part of it is also there, where people, if they only know that there can also be some business in sanitation, then people will also begin to explore opportunities that are around investing in sanitation. And that is why we're not just looking at people that must use the top, we're also looking at this other side. He has also mentioned...
provided. But yes, I'm interested in these 2 million toilets. I mean, this project by the federal government, I mean, what, has it begun already, and what is the strategy to achieve this? Okay.
Now, the Clean Nigeria campaign is about creating awareness to people and then making sure that the households are aware, because when we look at the numbers, now let me just take us a little bit backward. Okay. Now, sometime in 2016, a national roadmap to end open defecation was actually launched, and that has not been operational. It has not been operationalized because most states also were able to develop their own state-specific roadmap. But after that, what has happened next? Yes, the model that has been in place, the community-led total sanitation, which is actually a community-driven approach, has only been able to bring us to getting, we have 13 local governments in Nigeria today that are open defecation free. And looking at that, and looking at the fact that 2025 is around the corner, that model cannot get us to open defecation by 2025. So something has to be done. And we are looking at the area of the institutional sanitation, making sure that the schools, the markets, they all have facilities. Okay. And that is something that the government is also going to come in that aspect, to ensure that within the institution, the facilities are there. And then how about the PPP arrangement? We're also looking at the private sector, engaging with the private sector to ensure that also the private sector are also able to be part of this whole campaign. And with that, we believe, but more of these are going to be provided by the households. And the households need to be sensitized to know that they should be able to provide facilities for themselves at the household level.
Okay, Zaid, let me bring you in here. We're about 2 minutes to break. I know that for UNICEF, I mean, for this program, for your WASH, is about building capacity of, of your partners. Could you talk us through that?
Okay, if you allow me a little bit, I mean, I wanted to modify something that was said. You said this, what is the government planning to do about it? Now, the government on its own cannot do that.
Obviously, yes.
Okay, this is not a project for the government. I mean, we need all the resources available in Nigeria to work into that. And it needs some planning, really. I mean, conceptually, you need to change the behavior of people. Once they are convinced, they will need to have the financial resources to do it, and there will need to be some technical resources that would enable this to happen. Now, we spoke earlier about the commitment of the government. The president of the country has reiterated this commitment last November. What needs to happen now is to make this happen at the state level. I mean, here each state is it's a standalone entity on its own. So the states will need to have a proper buy-in. There will need to be leadership, and leadership here is to make a commitment, domesticating the roadmap to the state requirements, holding the authority responsible. If I am to do that, I will do an operations center for each state that would report back to the highest authority within the state on what progress has been achieved on a day-to-day basis. And then the communication campaign that we spoke about, this is something that will need to happen. And then use the successful examples that we have spoken about, that we have been able to work together. But these are examples. They will need to be brought in and pioneered. And finally, and most importantly, is to use the powers of the private sector. Mrs. Opara has mentioned this several times, and this is key to the success, really. I mean, the private sector is quite vibrant, it's quite capable in Nigeria, but for some reason in the development sector, and especially WASH, they have not been active. They could do lots of things. I mean, advocacy. They could talk to decision makers to allocate more to the sector.
Well, that's thought for us. We're going to come back and pick up from where we left off. Thank you for your time so far. I've been speaking to Chizoma Opara. She's the acting coordinator of Clean Nigeria campaign at Nigeria's Ministry of Water Resources. I've also been speaking to Zaid. Jurji. He's the chief of section Water, Sanitation and Hygiene at UNICEF. If you're just joining us, Chizoma Opara, acting coordinator of Clean Nigeria campaign at Nigeria's Ministry of Water Resources, and Zaid Jurji, chief of section Water, Sanitation and Hygiene at UNICEF Nigeria, are with me today, and we are focusing on discussing Nigeria's renewed sanitation drive. I thank you so much for your time so far. Chizoma, let me bring you in here. Zaid talked about private sector buying. He talked about the fact that for the projects, both UNICEF and the Clean Nigeria, for it to be successful, bringing in the private sector, having the buy-in of the private sector will be critical. Now, for the Clean Nigeria project, I know that it's still in its early stages, but talk to us about how you intend to partner with the private sector to make it successful.
Okay, thank you very much. Just like I said, we're sometime in May 8th to be precise, the Federal Executive Council approved the Clean Nigeria campaign. And part of that approval is a national campaign which will be flagged off by the president. And at that point, that is where we intend everybody will come on board, because it's a transformational movement, it's a social movement, so everybody will be brought, to be part of this whole exercise. And a 70-man committee was inaugurated also about the 27th of May, and that planning committee is working on the national campaign and bringing everybody on board, the private sector, the government, the development partners, children, youths, everybody will come on board. So we are looking at a national campaign which will be driven by the president, and shortly after that the governors will also key in, because they are going to be part of it at the national level. So the governors will also key in at the states, and it will trickle down to the local governments.
But for the private sector, what specific contributions would you like to see the private sector bring to the table?
Fine. Now, for the private sector, we are also actually looking at a wash private sector, partners that private sectors that will come into the wash sector using the platform that already exists to see that they have their corporate social responsibility in the wash sector, and also the PPP arrangement, ensuring that we also have the public toilets, also looking at the private sector, and to use their platforms, because we know that they have platforms that they have been using to reach out to most of their customers. So we also want them to leverage on that, to use these platforms to reach out to other private sectors to come on board for the Clean Nigeria campaign. Okay,
Zaid, for UNICEF, how is UNICEF partnering in this project?
I mean, we've been partners with the government over the past 6 years, I would say.
But this again, project specifically,
I mean, at this point, we are a convening power only. We try to make things happen. We come up with ideas. We sit together. We discuss, and we try to do something, and we try to advocate. And I mean, as I said earlier in that, I mean, we have two main things. If they happen, then, I mean, the likelihood of achieving the target becomes possible. First, it's the buy-in from the local government, from, I mean, state government. And here when I
get the sense, because you mentioned this again, I get the sense that, you know, this is something we've been talking about for a very long, for years. I get a sense that there still isn't a buy-in on the part of the state government. The government is closest to these communities.
Well, buy-in comes in different shapes, and they will need to happen simultaneously. So buy-in is not only making a statement, say we want to achieve open defecation and sit back. This is something that will need to happen consistently. Consistently, finances, making an enabling environment for the private sector to come, and then practicing their leadership. The leaders of the state should be talking to their communal leaders. At the end, changing behavior is not something that happens overnight, but when it happens through communal leaders, the speed with which this happens is faster. I mean, why wouldn't a state governor, for example, writes letters to communal leaders asking them to talk to their people? Within a community, a smaller community, 150 people, 200 people, the reception and the reaction towards these statements and requests becomes much faster. And this is what we need to do. And then, as I said, once they get the conviction that this is something they will need to do, they turn their heads and they will see there are capacities. There is a mason who could construct the latrine. If they need money, they could borrow from a place. And then for bigger things, because the states will need also to construct those public latrines. Public latrines will need to be run. The problem here with everything, not only sanitation, it's water, it's sustainability. I mean, we build things and then we turn our back. We think they will run on their own. This is not the case. It's like buying a car. A car doesn't go on its own. You need to take it to the mechanic every now and then. It's the same here. And I know so many private sector companies, they have, I mean, it's part of their CSR, the corporate social responsibility. They have invested in water systems, but they don't want to do it because they go back and they see it in ruins. No, here this is a possibility for business. At the end, everyone will win. I mean, the private sector will need to make profit. This is what they are there for. So they will come, they will run systems, and then the states, the authorities, they cannot play this role of providing a service. No, they regulate. They see that things adhere to standards that they have set.
So does this inconsistency, because I get a sense that inconsistency continues to be a challenge, does that frustrate some of the efforts that UNICEF puts into ensuring that there is sustainability, that all the projects that you do and then the outcomes that you expect along with the targets, have the desired impact at the end of the day? Is that frustrating for you?
Look, at the end, I mean, UNICEF's role is a supporting role. I talk about the sector.
I know,
but
we
did a survey for everything.
You also build capacity.
Yes,
you
I
work
mean,
with
this is a point. This is a point. I mean, we try. This is a strong element in everything that we do. But when you look at the situation in the entire country, sustainability is a big issue. It's a big problem, and that the same NOM survey has highlighted some figures that are really appalling. And if something is not done about that, the problem is that whenever you do an investment, when you bridge a gap, you think that you have constructed what is needed and you turn to other gaps. But in fact, if you don't take care of the first one, it will deteriorate and it will vanish.
Chizoma, let me bring you in here because obviously there's so many moving parts and key issues have been brought up. Sustainability obviously is key. Continued awareness obviously is key on the part of the government and of course supporting our partners, especially the private sector also. But what with this project, I know, like I said, it's still in its early stages. But what assurances that with this project things are going to be different? And you take into cognizance, factors such as sustainability to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not continued?
Okay, now sustainability has to do with ownership from the onset. Now from the onset, as you start a project, let everybody be part of it from the onset, and that is what we want to achieve with the national campaign that is starting, and everybody comes on board to be part of it. Now what are other sustainability measures that we are looking at? We have the campaign on hand washing, which is something that I remember during the time of Ebola, we started it and everybody has dropped that. So it is something that should be continuous. And then we're also looking at fecal slop management, we're looking at menstrual hygiene management. All these are issues around hygiene and sanitation that has to do with behavioral change. So with capacity being built here and there, we see a situation where most of these will be taken up. And we're looking at, because most of this is happening at the local government level. So when the capacities at the local government levels are built, you see that there are a lot of follow-up activities within these communities. Mr. Zaid talked about sanitation marketing. Marketing is, of course, another sustainability measure that can be put in place, because when people also see that there is a business in sanitation, they would buy into it. Today, in the few local governments and communities where sanitation activities are going on, we see that we now have entrepreneurs, we have toilet business owners, and they have seen that a lot of them, of course, anybody who goes into business wants to make some profit. So they're also seeing that, yes, there's actually business in sanitation, but how many people are going into it? So that awareness needs to be created. So while the campaign is running in terms of a lot of advocacy, a lot of media buzz, a lot of communication around it, that other side of ensuring that the sustainability mechanisms are put in place to ensure that even when we have attained this open defecation free 2025, that is sustained.
Zaid, we have about 3 minutes left. What positives do you see that still gives you hope? I know that right now the numbers are not encouraging, but what positives, what bright spots do you see that give you hope, make you optimistic that, okay, as time goes on, we will see, if there is dedication and commitments, we'll see a change?
Okay, the commitment by the president, nothing more could happen, than that. And then the new thing is bringing in the private sector. I'm so hopeful that with that, this is an enormous resource that is so efficient and effective, and we need to bring it on board. And for that, we need to have an enabling environment, and this depends on the authorities as well. Now, for the private sector, we've been having discussions. We are hopeful that there will be a sort of a conference in the middle of September. We know that there is a lot of interest. I don't want to preempt that, but there is a lot of interest for people to come forth. It's not only about the corporate social responsibility or making profit. It's also being part of this noble cause. It's a big thing. Africa, Nigeria is the most populous in Africa, 200 million people. If you move, the move will be felt by the entirety of the continent and by the entirety of the world. In UNICEF, figures of Nigeria, they count. They come back to us. Any progress that is made will have an impact on the world's children, and this is what we want to do. So it's a noble cause. There is a possibility, and things will need to happen simultaneously. Those are all important elements. One of them, it's like a car going on 3 tires instead of 4. This is the importance of working together and doing it continuously. Only with that, we will be able to conquer this challenge.
Chizoma, we have just 1 minute left. Just echoing some of what Zaid just said just now. Can we expect something different this time? I'm hoping that perhaps I can bring you back not too long from now with some good news.
Yes, I think that there is hope with the statements that have been made by the President, and the Honorable Minister has also, the then Honorable Minister for Water Resources, who has actually also, there was something he actually did, the retreat that we had, where he brought states together. And the states have been part of that, also need to be followed up. And we are believing that with that awareness that we have today, most people are now aware, unlike 47 million Nigerians defecating in the open. By 2nd of October 2029, India will exit from the Committee of Nations defecating in the open. And you can imagine Nigeria standing up there. So we don't want to be there for too long. So a lot has to be put in place to ensure that we eradicate open defecation.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. Zaid, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I've been speaking to Chizoma Opara. She's the acting coordinator of Clean Nigeria campaign at Nigeria's Ministry of Water Resources. Also joining me today has been Zaid Jurji. He's the chief of section Water, Sanitation and Hygiene at UNICEF Nigeria. With that, on Beyond Markets, thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember that you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of Beyond Markets on our website. That's cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and of course you can send your thoughts and your comments to my Twitter handle. It's at Esther Awoniyi. From myself and the team, it's bye for now.